Assalamualaikum everyone, my name is Nitasha and welcome to another episode of Shaam Ki Chai, where I interview Pakistanis doing really cool things. And today I am super excited to have with us Rabeel Warraich, who is the founder and CEO of Sarmayacar, which most people would argue is one of the largest venture funds in Pakistan. Thank you so much for being with us, Rabeel.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to dig into your journey of building Sarmayacar and just everything that you've done. But before we start, I want to just start right at the beginning actually and learn a bit more about what part of Pakistan you're from.
I'm a Pindi boy by birth.
Oh, Pindi boy by birth, okay.
And also grew up there for my primary education and then ended up going to a cadet college in 8th grade in Hassan Abdal.
Wow.
So an Abdalian, which I guess adds to the whole Pindi boy element.
Okay.
And ended up doing my O-levels there.
Okay.
And did my A-levels in Islamabad in a school called Rabeels. So stayed around the Pindi, Islamabad, kind of Hassan Abdal area for up until college really.
Okay, that's really cool. And it's somewhere in there's a boarding school, right?
That's the cadet college, yeah.
Okay. Well, how was the boarding school experience?
I think it was one of the most formative experiences I had growing up.
Okay.
Because obviously living in a boarding school environment, all boys, run by the military, so having to get up 4:30 a.m., going around wearing shorts and doing physical training,
right.
And then still having to worry about academics because it is a very academically inclined institution.
Right.
I think it was, again, balancing all of that was a key learning, and I think also one of the key factors that I think has contributed to my being able to adapt to different circumstances and environments has been the learning from there, which is the ambition always was to end up studying at least in some of the more prestigious institutions, at least based on what the perception is at that time, and not to say that Pakistani institutions are not good, but it's just that in the opportunities that were available at that time, and I had gotten a bit of exposure because of family being in the West. Okay. And interestingly, my father also having a travel agency, which allowed for some travel. Okay. So the ambition was always to end up somewhere in the West.
You got into MIT. That's incredible. What was that experience like going there?
I think it was quite surreal. First of all, getting in and then being able to, I guess, it was a sort of validation of some of the effort that had gone in before. Right. And even when I look back at the time at the boarding school, it all seems justified that if you end up at a place like that. Right. And I really just wanted to make the most of it. Right. I'm a nerd by background, by personality maybe. Okay. But maybe I got a little bit of social polish at that university, and which allowed me to also maybe do reasonably well because when you're filled with in a place with nerds, the one that has a little bit of social polish can stand out. But I was just making the most of the opportunity, and obviously academics and career orientation was very important. But at the same time, again, opportunity to meet and interact with people from all over the world, pretty much all of them smarter than me, also giving an opportunity to learn. But at the same time, also building on that same adaptability that I referenced earlier, that I started picking up in that cadet college. I think that also continued through university.
Right. Your early career started off in finance, right? Not venture. Did you want to be a venture capitalist? I guess as a kid, I don't know. But what did you want to be growing up?
No, I think it's interesting because my first job out of college was an investment banker. Okay. But if you asked me even in the first year of joining MIT what a banker was, then I'd explain a teller.
Oh, a bank teller.
So the concept was a little bit alien, but I always wanted to be, as we describe it, on the buy side, an investor role, and some of that I picked up at a early age when my father used to go out of town and maybe buy a car with an Islamabad number plate in a different city because there would be a little bit of an arbitrage opportunity. So the knack for trying to find good deals, trying to kind of make a financial return was something that interested me.
You truly could have done anything anywhere in the world. And did you ever evaluate other countries or other places, or was it always the goal to go back home?
I think the completion of the circle was always going to be if I ended up going to Pakistan. But everyone has their own framework for deciding.
Right.
My framework was that I was convinced that the opportunity was there in Pakistan.
Okay.
But what's the sort of a fallback or call it insurance did I have of if it didn't work out,
right.
what would I do instead? And I think that just really changed the decision making like process in my head.
Yeah.
And beyond a certain stage, incremental money was not really kind of checking the box.
Right, right, yeah.
And I had, alhamdulillah, like a very comfortable lifestyle and had some of the most amazing opportunities I could have only dreamed of at the beginning. But that apnayat thing was missing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So while it could have been more money, it could have been like, nice fancy role in some of these places, ultimately also start feeling like a number to them, right? Like, because the thing is, it's not your creation, and if it's not your creation, and particularly if it's not even in your country, then that certain sense of belonging or ownership with that thing is a little bit limited. And because of that, again, this is remarkably lucky that, like, getting to do something which I was trained in in my own country, where I can get a little bit of recognition, hopefully also make money.
Of course.
So it was just the ideal combination, which if I put together also with the aspect of being close to family, like friends that I grew up with, it just was too difficult for any other place to compete with. With that said, if you take my passport away and, like, remove this possibility of being able to travel and, like, again, engage with different ecosystems, people from different places that are in my network, I would again be a different person and maybe not as happy being in Pakistan if that option wasn't there. So in a way, lucky to have best of both worlds in a way. And I didn't feel that I needed to live out of somewhere else to be able to do that. So now I guess I'm getting to live that life.
Well, that's incredible, and what a journey. So let's learn a little bit more about the early days of Sarmayacar. So when did you start it? Why did you start it? Did you always think, hey, I'm going to start my own thing, or were you like, I'm going to join a new firm and then go from there?
Yeah, so the possibility of going back to Pakistan and joining a firm was not there.
Oh, it's not there.
So it was always going to be go back and build something of your own, because that was the thing that I'd learned and I wanted to implement. Like, have your team implement a culture, introduce something. So the genesis of Sarmayacar was really the notion of introducing professional venture capital to Pakistan. And that's where the white space was. If I'm a little bit selfish, maybe like wanted to plant that flag as the first venture capitalist in the country. And so the way it started was I was still working in private equity out of London, and every holiday that I had, like in the year 2016, was basically spent in Pakistan, meeting stakeholders, founders, investors, regulators, and trying to figure out where the gap was exactly. And in just to use venture terminology, there was a shortage of risk capital in absolute numbers in Pakistan, but in particular any sort of value additive capital. And so the framework that I was using at that time was, what is that application, like how should it be structured, which allows for some of the more mature ecosystems and investors present there to actually start investing in Pakistan and to give them a structured avenue to be doing that. Together with, of course, taking my own exposure and investing my own some of the savings that I had. So that translated into initially doing a deal by deal kind of syndicate structure. And like my partner Bernard in the fund now, he was one of the first ones to also join in. My best friend Karsten, and, quite a few of these folks that obviously had heard me talk about Pakistan and about the opportunity there, but even they didn't have an avenue to invest in the country.
Right. Yeah.
And so when the opportunity came up, they supported, and they kind of joined forces in that sense.
That's cool. Yeah.
And we then did the first deal, and as things go in Pakistan, when you start waving cash, you're going to have a very long line like that. Yeah, bilkul. And that's really how it started flowing. It kind of like exploded initially, because obviously it was something a little bit new for the country. And initially it was also challenging, like, because at that time it wasn't a structured fund.
Sure.
But it was about bringing some of that domain knowledge, some of those expertise, and really building bridges with like other ecosystems, and trying to learn from those ecosystems in terms of like, what has worked, what hasn't, and trying to localize that in Pakistan. It was Patari, which is a music streaming platform.
It was Patari, no way. Okay.
And the background to that is actually in 2012, I think, sometime in 2012, with a couple of my colleagues at GIC, we had invested a very small amount in Spotify at that time. And we bought some shares from one of the early employees. And so that gave a little bit of understanding of how the overall music sphere was moving towards digital, and then within digital it was moving towards streaming rather than outright ownership. And so coincidentally, when I was going around in 2016 asking people what should be an area that we should look into, or what sort of companies are interesting, a lot of those people mentioned Patari at that time, because it was like one of those kind of like obviously it was getting media attention as well, because it is a media player too. And so I remember calling up, getting in contact of one of the co-founders, and speaking to them and mentioning, hey, I'm this investor out of London, and I'm invested in Spotify, so can we have a conversation? They didn't think much. They said next day we're coming to Islamabad. I was in Islamabad at that time. They were based out of Lahore. And quite literally, we had a cafe which in F6 Islamabad, Chai Khana. Chai Khana ke andar ek meeting room sa, sets like maybe 6-8 people. We booked that for I think 3 hours, but this management meeting, as we were calling it, lasted almost 5.5 hours. Quite literally, मैंने अपने phone के ऊपर voice note के ऊपर पूरी वो चीज़ record की. I had my brother, a couple of a very close friend of mine, Zain Tabani, who's now also an investor in the fund. And we basically just had that meeting, and coming out of the meeting, have a quick discussion around okay, they're looking for $200,000, and how do we split it up? And then I called up Karsten, Bernard, and thankfully they're okay, put us down for whatever you're putting in.
That's amazing.
And that's how the first deal really came about and got done. And then when it was announced, that's when social media picked it up, and then that's how that momentum started building as well. We started getting flooded with new deals,
probably,
and at that time, of course, it was a different journey, because you have to be everything from janitor to salesman.
Of course, yeah.
But you have to do these things.
You got to do it.